Hello, and welcome to this edition of Represent NYC on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I'm Shah Ally, the chairman of Manhattan Community Board 12, which covers the neighborhoods of Washington Heights and Inwood. Our district spans 155th Street, river to river, north to the end of Manhattan. Today, we'll be talking about issues of real estate development and affordable housing. I am joined by two members of Community Board 12, Maria Luna and Priscilla Mota-Willis. Thank you both for joining me today. As you both are aware, community boards are advisory. We serve a very powerful position in our community. We are advisory, but we are persuasive. Community boards handle all sorts of issues, high issues such as affordability and housing, to transportation, to something everyday like transportation and sanitation. I am honored to have you both here today. Just as a way of introduction, Maria Luna is one of our senior members of the board, having served on the community board for over 30 years. Maria has also served as a prior chairperson to the board, is currently a district leader and president of the 33rd Precinct Community Council. So thank you, Maria, for being here.
Thank you, Sharon.
Priscilla is a Inwood resident, has served on the board for 2 years, is the vice chair of the Youth and Education Committee, and also sits on our licensing committee. So thank you, Priscilla, for being here. You know, our community boards deal with a myriad of issues, a variety of issues, and all of them are important. The one issue that we're dealing with now, which seems to be at the forefront and has energized our community greatly, is that of affordable housing, the new construction happening, especially with two projects. The two projects that you're both familiar with is the new development at 4650 Broadway, which is a new construction that could go up about 15 to 20 stories, as well as the city's desire to rezone and develop certain parts of Inwood. And it's an issue you both are aware of and very involved with. So starting with Maria, since Maria has the expertise and experience dealing with a lot of issues throughout many years, Maria, you've seen a lot happen during your time on the board. What are your thoughts on the projects happening now in the district, and in particular Inwood?
Okay, let me just go back a little. Thank you so much for allowing me to come here, and you know, next to Priscilla, that is a newcomer to the board. I think people have to realize that the community boards is not just a community board, it's really a small city hall, because we deal with every issue of service in our communities. And that we do advise, and our main goal is to make sure that we represent the community in total, not just individual. We're not sitting there as one individual trying to get my agenda forward. It's really what is important to our community to make sure that we achieve all those goals that everyone is interested in. This development that we have seen coming very, you know, I think very forward, have merits. Merits are the negatives and the positives. Let's focus first on the positives. We are in our community, you know, Washington Heights and Inwood. One of the things that the conversations that we have in the street is like affordable housing. What is affordable? What do we have to offer as a community board to our communities to make sure that they are stayed in our communities, that you know, people are scared that new people will come to our communities if these developments, you know, takes hold, and with the impact not only in the you know, the population, also in the education system, the transportation, the infrastructure of our community. Those are the things that we need to make, you know, to get hold of in order to approve or disapprove this project. As you know, that you just mentioned, I've been in the board for so long. I have seen projects like this come and never take hold. The Sherman Creek area. I remember when Ruth Messenger was the board president, she presented plans of redeveloping the Sherman Creek. And I think that, you know, now this is 2016. It still is going on. What happened there? Beautiful plans. We have seen the beautiful colored plans that they come, the city, and also some interest parties that we have in our community that comes and they think that they're going to take advantage of us. But we have a community board that is really aware that we cannot just rubber stamp something that in the future is going to impact negatively in our communities. So I am very careful when I vote in this type of things because my focus has always been the community, residential community, where we want to bring up our children safely. We want to have people that could continue living there and not the transition people. Some people will come and buy into those, those projects, but they don't see it as a place that they're going to stay for a long time. So I think that we need to be, a little careful about how we go about seeing this rezoning.
So you mentioned the one benefit is more affordable housing, right? Although that term needs to be defined, but at least the idea is to have affordable housing to keep folks in the community. So that's obviously an advantage. What do you think are a clear disadvantage to having this type of construction in our community?
Well, the definition of affordable. We need to know that affordable for some people is unaffordable for others. My focus right now is trying to maintain the housing stock that we have for the people who reside there. That's a priority. It's not like the ones that are coming and things like that, because with changes are going to come higher prices. They're going to have pressure in the people who have lived for hundreds of years, and we do have people who have lived in those buildings for 2 or 3 generations. So how do we protect those people from the ones that are coming to those new affordable apartments? Because it's really and to tell you the truth, I'm going to be bad. Small apartment. I have never seen tiny little apartment that they call like 2-bedroom apartment. You have a sofa, and you don't, you cannot have a piano. And if you have a piano, you have to sit in the kitchen to do everything else. So it's really, really interesting what's happening. The people who are pro development of housing, affordable housing, and those that are the reality. Make sure that we need to protect the housing that we have there first, and then we can deal with the new projects later.
Good, that's great. It sounds like Maria's laid down the roadmap for us to have this discussion. There were a lot of things that Maria mentioned in her answer. So Priscilla, I'm going to ask you, picking up from where Maria left us. You're a resident of Inwood.
Yes.
First, what I've learned is that residents of Inwood love Inwood, and that there's a certain loyalty and culture to Inwood. The 4650 development is in Inwood. The rezoning is happening in Inwood. Tell us, as an Inwood resident, what does Inwood mean to you?
Well, thank you. I love Inwood. I'm one of those residents. I'm a divorced mother of 2. I have a 19-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old son. We have the most amazing parks in probably, I would say, the whole city. We have the clusters. I mean, we just have waterfronts. We have beautiful establishments, restaurants, and there's a cultural feel. It's one of the few neighborhoods in New York City that still has a huge Dominican heritage population. We have the Irish that are still there. We have a Jewish community. So we have a lot of different diverse cultures and communities. And I think that that's special. It's harder to find in New York City these days.
Sure.
So that's one of the things I love. I also moved into Inwood after my divorce because it was the only neighborhood in Manhattan that I could afford. Literally, there was no other place that I could find an apartment big enough for my family that I can take care of on my own. So that was one of the great things. I also love seeing the bodegas and the bodega owner saying good morning. There's times I come in with my groceries and they help me. So, there's a neighborhood feel. And I think that for a New York native like myself, who was born and raised on the Upper West Side, I miss those days because New York has kind of changed a little bit, and so there's a little less of that. So I love that about Inwood. It's one of my favorite things. So
I think you both will agree that Washington Heights and Inwood is probably the last immigrant communities left in Manhattan.
Yes.
Right? Good or bad, we still hold on to a strong tradition of supporting our diversity, where I think our district has over 50% of a Latin base, and a majority of that are Dominican. Do you find, well, I'll start with you, Priscilla, and then we'll work backwards. Do you find that these proposed developments threatened the composition of our neighborhood?
Of course. I mean, there's a lot of great things. Maria listed some of them. But we have to be realistic. I mean, all you have to do is pay attention to what's happened in other neighborhoods. Harlem is an example. Now, many people will argue that there's been some great improvements and that a lot of people have benefited. Yeah, but then a lot of people are left behind. And one of the things that we're having is that a lot of the developers that are coming in don't have a vested interest in the neighborhood. They're seeing dollar signs. And I think a lot of the residents are scared because if we can no longer afford to live in Inwood, then where do we go? A lot of residents go to the Bronx, but even the Bronx is going through a transitional stage. So I think you're seeing a lot of fear. A lot of the older residents ask me all the time, am I going to be able to stay here? But then you have the young families that are looking for somewhere to raise their families in the city, and Inwood would be an option. So it's a middle ground. It's tricky. It's difficult. But I think that we have room to kind of negotiate that. I think the residents that are upset, and rightly so, their voice needs to be heard. They're nervous, they're scared. And a lot of these developers in the past have not been transparent as far as how many apartments are affordable. And like Maria said, affordable to who? Because affordable at $120,000 a year is not affordable to the majority.
Sure.
So, there's a lot of things that are going on right now. I think that this issue has ignited a grassroots movement. I think that if anything else, it's gotten the people engaged in a real conversation about politics and the way it works. And it's gotten people to kind of pay attention.
Sure.
So less voting, just kind of voting, but paying attention to what you're voting for, who we're putting in office, who's representing the community. But I think that if we start having real conversations about how to preserve what we already have without bringing in huge developments, which is what really is going on, then we might be able to come up with a middle ground that will help families like myself that are still new families, but we've loved the neighborhood.
So I think we can all agree, right, that for better or for worse, community boards reflect the people. We are a composition of the people. Without the people, we don't exist. And one of the things that makes me very happy as a chairperson is the level of engagement of the community. We have meetings all the time. We act on issues where there's very little participation by the community. This issue has started strong, and it's only getting stronger, right? Would you both agree with that?
Yeah, but you have to realize also that the two developments that we are talking about, the impact on the one on Sherman, Avenue. We are surrounded. Community Board 12 is the only community board that is surrounded, like 3/4 of the community is by park and waterfront. Now, what do we do about that? We have the cloister we have for Tryon Park. This development is going to block the one I'm talking about, the Broadway and Sherman, is going to block a view of the Fort Tryon Park. You're aware that what a beauty that particular area is. The impact that you said, is probably going to hurt the plants, the trees, the beautiful things that we have in our community in that particular area. The Sherman Creek area. Are we going to compete with the Midtown Manhattan, the West Side? Have you seen the buildings that are coming up there? It is incredible. So we need to make use of the waterfront, but is it for the people in our community, not for those that are going to be, living in some humongous buildings that are really going to be. It's going to be another part of Manhattan that's not going to be as appealing as we want it to be. We need to make sure that the canoes and all the things that are happening. The environment is extremely important that we maintain a clear environment in our community. So we have to be a little careful. And I agree with some people who are really voicing the disagreement, because once you start that, it's not going to stop. It will continue, and the beautiful, part of our island, which is the open Manhattan. That's the highest point in Manhattan, is going to be, disappearing. Also, one thing that I share that we need to focus on the community board is the commercial aspect in our communities. If you take a walk, and we have taken walks, the Washington Heights Inwood, we have seen so many storefronts that are empty. why are the owners of those buildings continuing pushing people out because of the outrageous prices in rent, instead of making it more accessible to people, the small stores that are needed. If you want to buy, some small things for the house, you have to go down to 34th Street, maybe to 14th Street, or go to the Bronx to get them. You cannot find, those small pop and, and mom stores that we used to have.
That could be a topic for another show, commercial protection, right?
It cannot be only restaurants, and it cannot be only, bars and things like that. We need to make sure that our community, the young people in our community, live in a community, not just in a place that they just can, see signs that are, all these telephone things and all the, I'm not going to mention names of companies, but it's really changing quickly. Sure. But we need to maintain our community as a place that you can walk safely also. That's one of the things. Our communities are very safe now. There was a time that, you were afraid to walk, late at night in the afternoon and things like that. But now it's safe, and this is the attraction of people coming up to our areas.
Well, let me ask Priscilla this question. And actually, Maria has set two distinct questions for you. Sure. I agree that the preservation of our natural resources is great. Protection and development of commercial corridors and affordable housing. That's exactly what the Economic Development Corporation through the city is looking to do with the rezoning east of 10th Avenue in Inwood. What can we do, going back in this idea of preserving our character, keeping the folks there, but also increasing access to waterfront, developing commercial and affordable housing? What do you think in terms of negotiating? You mentioned that word negotiating. And that's the first question. And then if you can remember the second question, if not, I'll ask you again. Our communities have become safer. We've become a lot more walkable. There's been development. But that is a product of development, especially on Dyckman Street. And I know you sit on the licensing committee.
Yes.
So development is not all bad, right?
No.
Where is that middle ground to make us all happy?
Wow, this is a very complicated question, and I am no economic. But I will tell you one thing. One of the things that I find is that the conversations about the new development that are coming in and the numbers that we're getting don't seem to align with the feel that we get for how much the community can afford. So that's number one. So when we keep using the word affordable housing, then we have to be transparent as far as what is affordable housing. And I think that one of the ways to start is by using the numbers that are real, meaning in our neighborhood, not upstate, not, we have to keep in mind what the median income is in Washington Heights and in the Inwood area. And if there's a way to force the developers into guaranteeing that at least 50% or whatever the number is going to be in that number, not the number that they're coming up with that doesn't align with the neighborhood, right? Then I think you have room for negotiation because now the community trusts you. Right. But what's happening now is that we've seen in past that a lot of people come in and they say, well, we're going to say this amount, and then it doesn't happen. So what you're having happen now is community board is being looked at as the residents are asking us, what are these apartments going to cost? Am I going to be able to stay here? And we as a community board can't give them real numbers. And I think that if we were to have a conversation with the developers where we got not a kind of sliding scale and, that's where the problem is. And I think until we have that, then you're not going to get a lot of trust from the community. And developers are going to have a hard time in order to move forward. And then second, I think that we need to make landlords responsible that are trying to remove tenants from their apartments or that are trying to scare tenants or trying to intimidate tenants, right? Because now we have to preserve the apartments that we have. And because landlords are seeing that, hey, we can get more money for these apartments, you're seeing that a lot of apartments are being renovated. You're seeing a lot of dump trucks in front of the buildings, which usually shows that there's, construction going on. Now the residents are nervous. What does that mean? So as community board members, having a conversation with landlords that are currently there, and let's find out. I don't know what the law as far as what tax breaks they can get, how we can kind of keep it going so that the people that are there are able to stay there. Right. And I think that if we do that, then you'll see that a lot of the residents, listen, all neighborhoods change. That's the history of time. We know this, right? But a lot of the residents that live in that neighborhood, if pushed to move, have nowhere to go. And that's a real conversation.
Right.
Because if we're saying this is the last affordable stop in Manhattan, and you're asking residents who have been here 30 years and 20 years, well, you could just go, well, where are they going?
It sounds like we need to have a conversation with developers to look at a community preference for these units and also a realistic look at numbers. We can deal with averages, but averages don't pay the rent.
No, we have to
Right.
hold them accountable.
Right.
So if they say they're going to do something and they say, this is what we're bringing, no more fluff. We can't do fluff in 2016, right? We have to be real. Because when you have a community that is being affected in a way that if it goes there, it'll never come back.
Right.
So catching them before we agree to anything and sitting them down and saying, if we don't do this, then we're not going to agree to this and we're not going to agree to that. Well, we have laws behind it and we're protected, then we can move forward. Until then, I find it hard to believe that we can.
Right.
I do sit on the license committee, as you mentioned, and my job is also to help small business owners and to also represent the community. So yes, you mentioned Dyckman and a lot of establishments that we now have in Dyckman that, like Maria said, 20 years ago, you didn't want to go down that strip. It was dangerous, it was scary. I know because as a teenager, I'd go up there to rebel, right?
So do you find Dyckman Street now to be safer?
It's a lot safer. But you know, then you have the residents who own their apartments on the Dyckman Strip that would say otherwise. Because with the restaurants, you also have...
Let me just stop there. It's not that the residents are against what is happening. What is happening is that the change has been so drastic and so quickly that they are really, I mean, it's a residential. When we're talking about residential community as opposed to a commercial area, and this is what they are afraid of, that things that are just, you know, keep growing in that type of environment, what is just focusing on entertainment. Okay, and this is why we have to respect the the
totally
people who are
them.
living there that have invested. And going back to the you used a word law. There are no laws that protect either tenants or also landlords. Landlords, there is a lot of landlords that are suffering. I mean, they have their property, so they're going to protect it. They're going to fight for what they have, owned for many years, and what they, how they're going to maintain their business, because it's a business, make money, and also it cannot be just, it's an imbalance. So we need to really push the pressure on the elected officials to make some laws, changes in some laws that will protect the commercial areas also, as well as the tenants.
Well,
Unless we do that,
Right.
I think we're going to continue this, bickering and this controversy, because we have to be realistic. If I own a building, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to get as much from that building as I can. This is a free society. It's a democracy. Everybody has their own right, and I don't think that, by saying that everybody, they're pushing us out. No, we need to also plan. And some of the things that we have seen is because we weren't able to plan.
Right.
And also have a cohesive society, groups, different ethnic groups. Going back to the 60s, 70s, the Jewish people did not agree to some of the requests from the new immigrants that are coming, especially the Latinos. And we put together a group of people, rabbi, people from different, groups, to make sure that all those schools that were built, the 8 schools, we were able to get 8 new schools built, because we got a consensus in the table, Jewish, African American, Latino, to make sure that we understood that we need to live together, that we have respected each other, and that we, in order to continue as, as a community, we need to, to have a dialogue, and we did accomplish that.
So I see this issue as being hard.
It's very hard.
It's a complex issue,
Yes.
and you both use the word realistic, that we need to be realistic.
Yeah.
So I have 2 closing questions, Priscilla and then to Maria. Priscilla, realistically, if development's going to happen, I believe I've heard you say affordable housing, but true affordable to our residents to keep a certain character in the neighborhood. If you were to negotiate with the developers, keeping affordable housing as the first, what other concessions would you ask for?
Well, I mean, if you're going to come into our neighborhood, then invest into our neighborhood, right? So we can use some better schools. Yes, we have a lot of good schools now, but we also have a lot of young people in our neighborhood. The kids have nowhere to go. So let's hold these developers, I hear you, they're landlords and they got to get money, but they got a lot of money. And they could put up some money for some new basketball courts, for some new after-school programs, for some of the things that the neighborhood needs. Maybe, you know, some of the things that we need as residents, right? If you're going to come in here, then those are the things that you offer the neighborhood in order to help improve it.
What about our transportation system? They're
Transportation,
bringing in
huge.
we're bringing in a lot of folks. What about our transportation?
The one train is the worst. We know this. A lot of us take the one train. It's packed. It's falling apart. I mean, it's literally falling apart. And that's some of the things that we need also. Fix the subway stations, fix some of these buildings that have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. Some of these buildings are pre-war. And you see it. You see the neighborhood kind of, in that sense, you know, needs a little retouch. But we are already a neighborhood that's crowded. And if new residents are going to come in, then we need the support of the redevelopment in the neighborhood in order to sustain the new residents and the residents that are currently there.
And Maria, we are a board that reflects the people's wishes. We are a board. We have a tough position as the board as well,
Yes.
because we don't reflect one voice. We don't reflect the other. We try to somehow get the best result for our community. And we're aided by, we're guided by the community. Can you tell us, in your many years of sitting on the board, seeing patterns and trends, what can our residents do to get involved and stay engaged?
Well, I think that we are involved already. It's just how much involved we are. And years ago, this is nothing new. It's when, if you recall, when Columbia University, New York Presbyterian, Yeshiva University, that built a mall on Amsterdam Avenue. When the hospital in Columbia were building, they're still building all those, fantastic, beautiful, necessary for them. Building of research and things like that. So this is nothing new. We need to just really focus as a community board, and I urge you as the chairman of the board, to make sure that we each one put our little agendas, aside, and then we face the reality, what we have right now, what it may become if we don't pay attention, and if we don't do our homework, this may fall apart. And we can get out of our hands, and our elected officials need to be sitting also at the table, because they do represent us.
So it sounds like we need to do our homework, be involved, stay involved, and listen to each other.
Sure.
And I think the word I'm going to end with is to be realistic, fair, and sensible, right? Sure. So that's all the time we have. I want to thank my guest, Maria. I want to thank Priscilla for being here with me today. I'm Shah Ally. Thank you for joining me on this edition of Represent NYC on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Goodbye.